Welcome to episode 21B of the Family Court Uncensored series. Today we're talking about the one-tier test, but before I explain what that is, I want to start with what you probably thought fatherhood would be, because understanding the gap between expectation and reality is essential to understanding the impossible position fathers face in family court. You probably thought you'd be the father who taught your child how to ride a bike. You'd be there when they fell off, scraped their knee, cried for a minute, then got back on with your encouragement. You'd be the one who pushed them to try again when things were hard. That's what fathers do. We don't rescue our children from every challenge. We help them to develop resilience by working through difficulty. You thought you'd be the parent who had robust physical play with your child, wrestling on the floor, throwing them in the air, rough and tumble, that makes them squeal with a mixture of excitement and slight fear. You know this is good for children. It teaches them about their bodies, about boundaries, about controlled risk. It's different from our mother's play. That's valuable. Children need both. You thought you'd be the disciplinarian when needed. Not the only one, but the parent who could deliver a firm no, who could set clear boundaries, who could impose consequences when rules were broken. You expected your child would sometimes cry when you disciplined them. That's normal. Children cry when they don't get what they want. They cry when they face consequences. That doesn't mean discipline is wrong. It means it's working. You thought you'd be the parent who encouraged independence. You'd let your child climb higher, run faster, take slightly bigger risks than your partner was comfortable with. You'd be the one saying, "You can do it," when they were uncertain. Sometimes they get hurt, sometimes they'd cry, but they'd also learn that they're capable, that fear can be overcome, that their fathers believe in them. You thought you'd share your interests and skills with your child. Maybe you're good at sports or music or building things or academics or your career field. You'd teach your child what you know. Sometimes that would be frustrating for both of you. Learning is hard. Teaching requires patience. There would be some tears sometimes when they struggled, but that's how growth happens. You thought you'd be the problem solver. When your child had a challenge, you'd help them think it through logically. You wouldn't just validate their emotions endlessly. You'd acknowledge their feelings, but also guide them towards solutions. I know you're upset that your friend isn't playing with you, but let's think about what you could do about that. Objective, practical, solution focused. That's how men tend to approach problems. You thought you'd be the parent who gave tough love sometimes. Not harsh, not cold, but direct. I know you tried, but we said we'd finish this, so we're going to finish it. I know you don't want to go back to school, but that's not optional. You'd be the parent who didn't give in to tears and protests when the thing was important. Children need to learn that emotions don't determine outcomes. Sometimes we do hard things even when we don't feel like it. You thought you'd prepare your child for the real world. The world doesn't care about your feelings. The world rewards effort, resilience, capability. You'd help your child develop those qualities. That means pushing them beyond their comfort zone. Sometimes letting them fail so they learn to handle failure. Sometimes requiring effort when they'd rather give up. You thought if you and your partner separated, that you'd still be able to be this kind of father. Maybe not full time if she had the child primarily, but during your time, you'd still have your relationship with your child. You'd still be able to parent differently according to your values and your strengths. You'd still be the father you always planned to be, just in a different household arrangement. You thought family court, if it came to that, would recognise that children need fathers, that children benefit from having both parents involved, that different parenting styles are complementary, not competitive, that mothers bring certain strengths and fathers bring different strengths, and children need both. You were wrong about almost all of it. What you're about to encounter in family court is something I call the one-tier test. It's the principle that any sign of your child's distress in your care is treated as evidence you're harmful, whilst the same or greater distress in the mother's care is ignored or rationalized as something else entirely. One tear during contact with you is too many. One scraped knee is evidence you can't keep your child safe. One frustrated cry when you're setting a boundary is evidence you're too harsh. One moment of separation anxiety when contact ends is evidence contact is unsettling. One instance of your child being tired or overwhelmed is evidence you cannot meet their emotional needs. Meanwhile, your child can cry all day in mother's care and it's just normal childhood emotion. They can have meltdowns, tantrums, nightmares, separation anxiety, sibling conflicts, all the normal friction of childhood, and none of it reflects on her parenting because she's the primary carer and tears with primary care are just normal life. The father you thought you'd be, the one who encourages resilience through challenge, who disciplines to teach boundaries, who engages in robust physical play, who gives tough love, who helps children develop independence, that father cannot exist in the family court system. That father will be reported by contact centres, criticised by CAFCAS, and used as evidence against you by the mother solicitor. The only father the court wants you to be is one who keeps your child in a state of constant emotional comfort, No tears, no frustration, no challenge, no discipline that results in upset. Just gentle, soothing, validating, entertaining. You must be Disney dad, not real dad. And even then, if one tear escapes, you failed. This episode will show you exactly how the one tier test operates, why it exists, and what it reveals about family court's fundamental assumptions about fathers. By the end, you'll understand why so many fathers feel they can't actually parent during contact, because they can't. Not if parenting means anything other than keeping the child superficially happy for the duration of the session. Let's start with physical play, because this is often the first place fathers encounter the one tier test. You're having contact at a contact centre, you're playing with your child the way you always did, wrestling, chasing, swinging them around, rough and tumble. Your child is laughing, excited, having fun. Then they bump their head slightly on your knee, or they fall and scrape their palm, or they get overstimulated and start crying. Nothing serious. The kind of minor bump that happens 10 times a day with any active child. You comfort them, they're fine within a minute, you continue playing. The contact centre supervisor writes in session notes, child became distressed during rough physical play with father. Child hit head and cried. Father appeared not to anticipate child's safety needs during physical activity. At the next hearing or CAFCAS assessment, this is presented as evidence that you engage in inappropriate physical play that puts your child at risk. The mother solicitor argues that unsupervised contact will be dangerous because you can't keep the child safe during physical activity. Meanwhile, your child plays in the park with the mother, falls off the climbing frame, gets pushed over by another child, skins their knee on the path, cries each time. None of this is reported. None of it reflects on the mother's supervision. It's understood to be normal childhood play that involves minor bumps. The father you thought you'd be, who teaches physical confidence through active play, cannot exist under observation. Any tear resulting from physical activity is evidence you're reckless, but you know that children who never experience minor bumps during play don't develop good body awareness or risk assessment. You know your rough play is good for your child's development, but you can't do it. One tear is too many. Now let's talk about discipline. You're having contact, your child misbehaves. Maybe they hit another child at the contact centre. Maybe they refuse to pick up toys when you ask. Maybe they speak to you rudely. You discipline them the way you normally would. Firm voice, clear consequence. We don't hit people. You need to sit here for 5 minutes to calm down. Or, I asked you to pick up the toys. If you don't do it now, we're not reading a story later. Your child cries. They're upset because they've been told no, or because they're facing a consequence, or because they didn't get their own way. This is normal. This is what discipline looks like. Children don't like being disciplined. They cry about it. They learn from it. The contact centre supervisor notes, father disciplined child for behaviour. Child became very upset and cried for several minutes. Father appeared stern and unresponsive to child's emotional distress. This is reported to CAFCAS and the court. The interpretation, you're too harsh, you lack warmth. You can't manage your child's behaviour without causing emotional distress. You need parenting classes to learn appropriate discipline techniques. Meanwhile, the mother disciplines your child constantly. Bedtime battles, getting dressed for school, not having sweets before dinner, turning off the tablet, doing homework. The child cries and protests. The mother holds firm. This is good parenting. She's setting boundaries. She's being consistent. The tears are just the child learning limits. Same behaviour, same tears, but your discipline is too harsh. Hers is appropriate boundary setting. You're being criticised for parenting the way every competent parent must sometimes parent. The father you thought you'd be, who uses firm but fair discipline, cannot exist. One tear from discipline is evidence you're punitive. Let's look at building resilience. You're at a contact centre, your child's trying to do a puzzle that's slightly above their age level. They're getting frustrated, they start to whine, I can't do it, it's too hard, you do it. You respond the way you thought a good father should. I know it's tricky, but I think you can figure it out. Look at this corner piece, where do you think that might go? You're encouraging them to persist, to work through frustration, to experience the satisfaction of solving something difficult. Your child gets more frustrated, they cry. I can't do it. I want you to do it. You stay firm. I'm not going to do it for you, but I'll help you think about it. Just look at the picture on the box. The contact supervisor observes this. The session notes say, child became distressed while attempting a puzzle. Child asked father for help repeatedly. Father refused to help, insisting child complete puzzle independently. Child remained upset for 10 minutes. The interpretation, you're insensitive to your child's emotional state, you're demanding beyond their developmental level, you lack responsiveness, you're making contact stressful by imposing inappropriate challenges. Meanwhile, the mother deals with the same frustration When your child struggles with homework or learning to tie their shoes or any other developmental challenge, sometimes she helps immediately, sometimes she encourages them to keep trying. When they cry from frustration, she decides whether to step in or push them to persist. Nobody's observing and judging these decisions. The father you thought you'd be, who teaches resilience by allowing struggle within appropriate limits, cannot exist under the one tier test. Tears from frustration are evidence you are demanding, but you know that children who are always rescued from difficulty don't develop persistence or confidence in their abilities. Let's talk about fostering independence. You're at a park with your child, you're in supervised contact, your child wants to climb on the equipment, you assess it, it's appropriate for their age, the ground is soft, the height is manageable, you encourage them, go ahead, you can do it. I'm here if you need me. Your child climbs, they're doing well, but they're a bit uncertain. They look back at you, you give them an encouraging nod. They continue, they get to the top, they're proud, you're proud. This is good parenting. You're teaching them they're capable. But the CAFCAS officer observing the session sees it differently. The report says, father encouraged child to engage in climbing activity that appeared to exceed the child's comfort level. Child looked to father for reassurance multiple times, suggesting anxiety about the activity. Father did not intervene or offer physical support. The interpretation, you don't recognise when your child needs help. You push them into situations that make them anxious. You prioritise independence over emotional security. Meanwhile, your child is in the mother's care. She takes them to swimming sessions. The child is frightened of the water initially. They cry. The mother encourages them. You can do it. The teacher will help you. The child gets in the water despite the fear. Over weeks, they learn to swim. That is understood as good parenting. The mother helped the child overcome fear to develop a valuable skill. Same dynamic, child uncertain, adult encouraging them to push through discomfort, child succeeds, but when you do it, it's insensitivity. When she does it, it's good parenting. The father you thought you'd be, who encourages age-appropriate independence, cannot exist. Any side of your child's uncertainty or discomfort within the challenge is evidence you're pushing too hard. Let's look at problem solving. Your child is upset because another child at the contact centre took the toy they were playing with. They come to you crying, he took my car, I was playing with it. You respond the way you think is helpful. I know that's frustrating. What do you think you could do? Could you ask him to give it back? Could you play with a different toy until he's finished? Could you ask if you can play together? You're teaching problem solving. You're helping your child think through options instead of just fixing it for them or endlessly validating their upset. You're acknowledging their emotion but guiding them towards action. Your child cries harder, but I want the car. It's not fair. You stay calm. I know you want it. Life isn't always fair, but you have some choices here. Which one do you want to try? The contact supervisor observes this exchange. The notes say, child became upset over toy conflict with another child. Child sought father's help. Father responded by asking questions rather than providing comfort. Child's distress escalated. Father appealed to lack warmth in response to child's emotional needs. The interpretation, you're emotionally cold, you don't prioritise your child's feelings, you're more concerned with teaching lessons than providing comfort, you lack the empathy needed for unsupervised care. Meanwhile, the mother handles similar situations regarding sibling fights, friend conflicts, disappointments. Sometimes she comforts first, then guides towards solutions. Sometimes she goes straight to problem solving. When your child cries about these situations in her care, she makes judgment calls about how to respond. Nobody questions her emotional attunement. The father you thought you'd be, who teaches practical problem solving rather than emotional validation, cannot exist. Tears that persist while you guide towards solutions are evidence you lack warmth, but you know that children who only ever receive comfort and validation don't learn to solve their own problems. Let's talk about sharing your expertise. Maybe you're good at football, you thought you'd teach your child to play. Or maybe you're academic and you thought you'd help them with learning. Or you're musical and thought you'd teach them an instrument. Or you're good at building things and you thought you'd do projects together. You're having a contact, you try to share your interest with your child. Maybe you're practicing football skills, your child is struggling to kick the ball properly. You demonstrate, encourage, give tips. Try using the inside of your foot. Good try, let's go again. Your child gets frustrated because they can't do it the way you're showing them. They cry, I can't do it like you. It's too hard. You encourage them, it takes practice. I wasn't good when I first started either. Let's keep trying. The contact supervisor sees a child crying while the child persists with an activity. The notes say, father engaged child in football practice. Child became distressed and stated activity was too difficult. Father continued with activity despite child's upset. Session appeared structured around father's interests rather than the child's emotional needs. The interpretation: you're imposing your own interest on your child without regard for their feelings. You're prioritizing your agenda above their well being. You're treating a contact as a teaching opportunity rather than relationship building. Meanwhile, the mother signs your child up for activities based on what she thinks is good for them: piano lessons, swimming, ballet, whatever. The child sometimes resists, sometimes cries, sometimes says it's too hard. The mother decides whether to let them quit or encourage them to persist. These parenting decisions aren't scrutinised. The father you thought you'd be, who shares his knowledge and passions with his child, cannot exist. Any tears during skill building activities are evidence you're focused on yourself rather than your child's needs. Before we go further, let's address something fundamental. The assumption underlying the one-tier test is that children are emotionally fragile and that any distress is harmful. But this assumption is selective and dishonest. Children cry a lot. Research shows that toddlers cry on average 6 to 8 times per day. Preschoolers 3 to 5 times per day. Even older children experience frequent emotional upset. This is normal childhood development. Children are learning to regulate their emotions. They don't yet have the capacity to manage frustration, disappointment, tiredness, hunger without sometimes crying. That's not trauma, that's Tuesday. Your child hears no 10 to 20 times per day in the mother's care. No, you can't have sweets before dinner. No, you can't stay up late. No, you can't have that toy. No, we're not going to the park right now. Each no potentially triggers upset. The child cries, protests, has a tantrum. The mother holds firm or sometimes gives in depending on the situation. This is normal parenting. Nobody suggests the child is being traumatized by being told no. Your child experiences frustration daily. Homework is hard. Getting depressed is annoying. Sharing with siblings is difficult. Losing at games is upsetting. Being tired but not wanting to nap is frustrating. All of these normal childhood experiences produce tears. Nobody interprets these tears as evidence that the child's home environment is harmful. Your child experiences separation regularly. Dropped at nursery, left with grandparents, goes to a friend's house, stays overnight somewhere without the mother. The child sometimes cries during these separations, especially initially. This is understood as normal separation anxiety that children work through. It is not treated as evidence that being separated from the mother is traumatizing. So children are robust enough to handle all of these normal daily emotional challenges. They can cope with discipline, frustration, separation, disappointment, conflict, minor injuries, all the normal friction of childhood. Except, apparently, when they're with their father, then suddenly they're fragile, then a single tear is evidence of harm. Let's look at how selective this fragility narrative is. The child is treated as emotionally fragile and vulnerable when the court is considering father contact. Kafka's reports will note that child appears anxious during contact, that they became upset at transitions, that they showed signs of distress during the session. These observations are presented as evidence the child is struggling emotionally with contact, but the same child is treated as resilient and adaptable when the mother makes major life changes. The mother moves house, requiring the child to change schools, leave friends behind, adjust to a new area. Is the child distressed during this transition treated as evidence the mother is harming them? No. It's understood that child adapt. It's a big change. There will be an adjustment period, but children are resilient. The mother introduces a new partner. The man comes into the home. The child now has to share their mother's attention, adjust to a stranger's presence, accept this person's authority in the home. Does the child's initial wariness or upset about this get treated as evidence that the new partner shouldn't be there? No. Children adjust to new family structures. It takes time, but they're adaptable. The mother decides to take the child on holiday abroad for 2 weeks. This means 2 weeks of no contact with the father at all. Does anybody assess whether this separation will cause the child emotional distress? Does anybody worry that the child might cry for their father during those 2 weeks? No. Children cope with temporary changes in routine. Do you see the pattern? The child is fragile when it justifies limiting father contact. The child is resilient when the mother's choices require them to be. Kafkas, the family courts, contact centres, these organisations know that children experience emotional ups and downs constantly. They know that tears are normal, they know that children adapt to change, but they apply this knowledge selectively. When assessing father contact, suddenly children are treated as psychologically vulnerable, easily traumatized, in need of protection from any emotional discomfort. When assessing anything else, children are understood to be developing humans who experience and work through difficult emotions as part of normal growth. This isn't ignorance. Kafka's officers are trained in child development. They know the research on childhood emotional regulation. Contact centre supervisors observe children daily. They see children cry over minor things and recover within minutes constantly. Family court judges have presided over countless cases. The no children adapt to new situations. The fragile child narrative is a choice. It's a framework that's applied when it serves a purpose, minimising father contact, and it reveals something disturbing about institutional complicity. Kafkas knows that noting a child became upset during contact in a report will be interpreted as a concern, even though children become upset multiple times per day in all contexts. They choose to document father contact tears in a way that pathologizes normal emotion. They don't document the children's tears at nursery drop-off or bedtime battles or sibling conflicts in the mother's care because those tears don't serve the narrative. Contact centres know that writing child cried when father enforced time out will be used against progression of contact. Even though every parent on earth has had their child cry when disciplined, they choose to frame normal parenting moments as evidence of inadequacy. They could write, father appropriately sets boundaries, child briefly upset then settled, but they don't. The framing is deliberate. Family courts know that children cry, that emotional ups and downs are normal, that tears during contact do not indicate trauma, but they treat father contact tears as uniquely significant anyway. They could ask, how many times does this child cry per day in the mother's care, and how do these contact related tears compare? But they don't. The comparison isn't made because it would reveal the double standard. This is institutional bias operating through the selective application of knowledge. Everybody involved knows children aren't fragile as the one-tier test implies, but treating them as fragile serves the function of keeping fathers at distance. So the fragile child myth persists, applied only when convenient, ignored when inconvenient. Children understand their environment because it's the only role they know. A child who sees their father twice a month for 2 hours accepts that as normal because that's their experience. They adapt. A child who lives with their mother and stepfather accepts that as normal. They adapt. Children are remarkably resilient and adaptable, except when acknowledging that resilience would mean giving fathers more contact. Here's the impossible position the one-tier test creates. You recognise that any tears will be documented and used against you, so you adjust your behaviour. During contact, you become hyper-focused in keeping your child happy. You don't discipline even when you should. You don't set boundaries. You don't challenge them with age-appropriate tasks. You don't encourage them through frustration. You don't share your interests if they require any effort. You just play, entertain, and validate for the entire session. Your child wants to do something unsafe. You redirect gently rather than say no firmly. Your child misbehaves. You ignore it or distract rather than disciplining. Your child starts to struggle with an activity. You jump in and do it for them rather than encouraging persistence. Your child wants constant treats and screen time. You indulge it because you can't afford the tantrum that would come from saying no. You become Disneyland dad. Not because that's how you want to parent, because it's the only way to avoid tears that will be used against you. You're not parenting, you're entertaining. You're not building a real relationship with real boundaries and real growth. You're performing superficial fun for 2 hours under observation. And then you're criticised for that too. The Kafkas report says, contact sessions appear entirely play-focused with little structure or routine. Father does not demonstrate appropriate boundary setting or discipline. There were concerns about whether father could meet child's needs in unsupervised care given the lack of evidence of him managing behaviour or implementing routines. You can't win. If you parent normally, discipline appropriately, encourage resilience, allow age-appropriate challenge, you get criticised because it sometimes results in tears. If you avoid all discipline and challenge to prevent tears, you get criticised for lacking parenting skills. The mother parents normally, she does a full-time job, discipline, boundaries, routines, teaching, challenging, comforting, all of it. Her child cries during all the normal friction of parenting, but her tears don't count. She's allowed to be a real parent. You're not. You're stuck between Disneyland dad and deficient dad. Either way, it's evidence you shouldn't progress to unsupervised contact. Now let's connect the one-tier test to the broader biases that create it. The test does not exist in isolation. It's the operational manifestation of status quo bias, the primary carer presumption, and maternal primacy. Status quo bias is the principle that courts are reluctant to disrupt the established arrangements. If a child has been living primarily with the mother, the court treats that as baseline that shouldn't be changed without compelling reason. Any sign that changing the arrangement could cause distress becomes evidence for maintaining the status quo. Here's how this connects to the one-tier test. The child is living with a mother, that's the current situation. You're asking the court to increase your contact to change the arrangement. Any tears during contact with you become evidence that the change would be disruptive. The tears are framed as the child's emotional response to disruption of their settled routine, but the child also cries in the mother's care. Those tears don't suggest the current arrangement should change. They're just normal life within the status quo. The asymmetry is built in. Tears that occur within the existing arrangement are acceptable. Tears that might occur if the arrangement changes are an unacceptable risk. This means you can never demonstrate that increasing contact wouldn't cause some emotional adjustment. Of course, there's adjustment when routines change. Of course, children sometimes cry during transitions, but under status quo bias combined with a one tier test, any tears during transition period are treated as evidence the change should not happen, rather than a normal adjustment that would resolve with consistency. The status quo is presumed correct until proven wrong. You can't prove it wrong without changing it, and you can't change it without some emotional adjustment. And any emotional adjustment produces tears, and tears prove the status quo was correct. It's circular reasoning that entrenches whoever currently has primary care. The primary carer presumption reinforces this because the child primarily lives with the mother. She's designated the primary carer. Primary carers are assumed to have superior knowledge of the child's needs, superior bonds with the child, superior ability to meet the child's emotional needs. The father is the secondary carer, the additional parent, the one who provides the supplementary time. Under this framework, tears with the primary carer are understood as normal friction of actual parenting. The primary carer can do all this hard stuff, bedtimes, discipline, vegetables, school mornings, homework. Of course, the child cries sometimes. That's what real parenting involves. The cheers don't indicate the primary carer is inadequate, they indicate they're doing the full job of parenting. But the father isn't the primary carer, he's the occasional parent. His time with the child is supposed to be positive, bonding, relationship building. If tears occur during this time, it suggests the relationship isn't secure. It suggests he doesn't have the established bond that would allow him to navigate the child's emotions smoothly. It suggests his parenting is inadequate. This is the eggshell test. The father is walking on eggshells. One broken shell, one tear, one moment of child distress, and it's reported, documented, used as evidence against progression of contact. The mother operates under normal parenting standards. She can have friction, conflict, tears, all the normal messiness of real parenting. The father operates under the eggshell test. Any crack is a failure. Any tear is too many. And here's where it connects to the systematic desire to minimize father's involvement. Every tear, every contact center note of child unsettled, every Kafka's observation of momentary distress feeds a system that's already predisposed to see fathers as less important, less competent, less necessary than mothers. Each broken eggshell becomes another piece of evidence in the file that says father is struggling, contact should remain limited, mother is primary parent, status quo should be maintained. The one tier test exists because of maternal primacy. The underlying assumption in family court is that children belong primarily with their mothers, fathers are additional. They're important in theory, but in practice they're supplementary to the mother-child relationship. Under maternal primacy, the mother is the child's secure base. Time with the mother is normal life, time with the father is additional, separate, potentially risky. This means any indication that time with the father causes distress is treated as significant. But distress in the mother's care is just normal childhood emotion within normal life. The one tier test, status quo bias, the primary care presumption, and maternal primacy all interlock. The child lives primarily with a mother because the mother had them from birth, or because she blocked contacts before proceedings started. This makes her primary carer and establishes the status quo. The child's familiarity with her is treated as evidence of secure attachment. Any distress with the father is treated as evidence of insecure attachment. This justifies maintaining the status quo, which keeps the mother as primary carer, which maintains maternal primacy. The circle is complete and self-reinforcing. The father you thought you'd be, who teaches resilience through challenge, who uses discipline to teach boundaries, who engages in robust physical play, who gives tough love, who helps children develop independence, who shares his skills and interests, that father cannot survive the one tier test. That father will break eggshells. That father will produce tears sometimes, and every tear will be evidence he's inadequate. The only father who can pass the one tier test is one who doesn't actually parent, who entertains but doesn't discipline, who comforts but doesn't challenge, who validates but doesn't teach, who keeps the child superficially happy for the duration of supervised sessions, and that father will then be criticised for not demonstrating real parenting skills. So how do you navigate this impossible standard? First, recognise it. Understand that you're operating under asymmetric standards. The father you thought you'd be cannot exist in this system. Your normal parenting instincts will be pathologised. Your strengths as a father will be treated as deficiencies. Second, document the positives. photos, videos if permitted, evidence of 99% of contact time that's happy and engaged. You need context to counteract the isolated moments of tears that will be reported. Third, parent authentically anyway. Don't become pure Disneyland dad even though you're being pressured towards it. Set some boundaries, use some discipline, encourage some challenge, accept that this will sometimes result in tears, and be prepared to explain that this is normal parenting, not evidence of harm. Fourth, reframe tears when they happen. Tears from appropriate discipline show you're a real parent. Tears from age appropriate challenge show you're fostering development. Tears when contact ends show the child wants more time with you. Don't let tears be automatically coded as evidence against you. Fifth, challenge the fragile child narrative directly. In your position statements, in your evidence, point out that the children cry multiple times per day in all caregiving contexts. Your child cries at nursery, at bedtime, when disciplined, when frustrated, when tired. These tears in mother's care are understood as normal. Ask the court explicitly, why are tears during contact with me treated as uniquely significant? What makes these tears different from the tears that happen daily in normal parenting? Sixth, explicitly name the double standard when appropriate. Point out that children are treated as fragile when it limits father contact, but resilient when mother's choices require it. The court accepts that children adapting to moving house, new partners, changing routine. Why is the same adaptability not acknowledged when considering increased father contact? Seventh, highlight institutional complicity. Kafkas, contact centres, courts all know that children aren't as fragile as the one-tier test implies. They know the research on childhood emotional development. They know tears are normal, they're selective, reveals bias, not best practice. The one-tier test is real. The fragile child narrative is a weapon. It's the operational manifestation of status quo bias, primary care presumption, and maternal primacy. It ensures fathers can never meet the standard because the standard is designed to keep children primarily with mothers. Understanding it won't make it disappear, but it will help you see what you're facing clearly. The gap between the father you thought you'd be and the father the court allows you to be is not your failure. It's the system's design. If you're a married man considering divorce, understand this. You will not be the father to your children that you currently are. The system will not allow it. Your child will adapt to seeing you twice a month because children adapt to everything, but you won't be able to parent the way you do now. You won't be able to discipline properly, challenge appropriately, teach resilience, share your interests, be a real father. You will be a supervised visitor walking on eggshells while your children's tears with you are treated as trauma and the tears with a mother are treated as Tuesday. Choose accordingly. This is general education about family court proceedings, not legal advice. If you're facing proceedings where your parenting is being scrutinised, consult a qualified solicitor. In episode 22, we'll look at your first hearing, the FHDRA, where many of these dynamics first become visible.